were not in the United States. Now, for having so many tanks, let's relate to the words of King David, chapter 17. If you can help this young Jonathan, help him find the place, please. Okay. What's the problem of the multiple number of weapons? Do you remember King David's words? Eile varechev ve'eile vasusim. Some of you may say it every day in the Shacharit service. Eile varechev. There are those nations that rely on their chariots, their tanks. Ve'eile vasusim. And there are those nations that rely on their power of their horses. Vanachnu. But we, b'shem Hashem nazkir. We mention the name of God. Before we went into the Gaza Strip for the last military operation, 2 military operations, thousands of soldiers gathered around the entrance to going into Gaza. And there were some great division leaders in the army that came down there, and other great leaders that came down there to give a pep talk. Who are we, the nation of Israel? What are we representing? When we're going to defend ourselves and fighting against terrorists and so on and so forth, we're carrying the flag of the nation, of 3,500 years of history, that this is an eternal nation, a godly nation. So yes, don't be mistaken in thinking that the army of Israel, led by a king, is not supposed to have an army. No chariots and tanks, no horses. Yes, whatever there's a need for, but not to have royal glory and have multiple numbers just for glorious reasons. There has to be modesty, because we can't forget, that's what the Ramban writes, that our reliance is on our physical power. We need physical power. We need the best phantom jets in the world, fighter planes and best pilots in the world. But we have to know we're riding on the wings of the divine presence. He's with us. There's no rational explanation that will be provided that the state of Israel defeated our enemies in a 6-day war in 1967. In all the annals of history, no such war took place in the world. Outnumbered, the weapons of the enemies. And therefore, we can see in the chronicles of Air Force pilots of the Air Force of Israel of the 6-day war, they wrote in their memoirs that they sensed there was some power in their cockpit that allowed them to do things that they could not do. Here, the Torah is telling us that if we do have a king, and who will declare to go out to war, just like now. We said yesterday that the state of Israel has an aspect of the king, a king of Israel. They're collecting taxes. They will declare or not if we have to go out to war. That's just like a king. So here we are in verse 16 of chapter 17. The Torah says, I want to read the entire pasuk. Rak lo yarbelo susim. Not too many horses. All the oral Torah discusses this. We're not going to discuss it now. Velo yeshivet ta'am mitzrayma. Because we might have a problem relying just on the horse market in Egypt. Leman arbotsos. Vashem amar lachem lo tosifun. Don't go back. Lashuv baderech hazeh od. Egypt, in that generation, represents the most coarse, the most gross type of culture. A very filthy, ugly culture. And therefore, and that was the great miracle that our nation grew up in Egypt amidst this spiritual, cultural, moral filth. And that's what Egypt represents. You know, there's a statement we can say, we can take sometimes a Jew out of the galut. But to take the galut out of the Jew is a hard job. It may take more than 6 months in Machon Meir. It may take a generation or 2 generations. Remember, we've been there. We thinking like Gentiles. We act often like Gentiles. or we act as Jewish individuals, but here we're a nation. There are national concepts. There are statewide concepts. It's a different situation. We're not used to that for 2,000 years, thinking like a nation matters. Don't go back to Mitzrayim. Pasuk Yud Zayin, regarding wives as well. A king that's sitting on the throne. What about wives? Verse 17. Velo yarbelo nashim. Not many wives. I can tell you from a little experience, one wife is enough. It's hard enough. One wife is enough. It's very... You agree, Mr. You agree, Ira. Velo yarbelo nashim velo yasur levavo. So many wives to take care of will remove his heart from of what we're about to see. We're going to soon talk about this matter. V'chesed v'zahav, silver and gold, lo yarbelo me'od. Of course, a king has to have wealth. He has to have wealth. There's also the honor of a king. Let's remember the following. The king is sitting on a throne. The throne of the Jewish people is a mirror of the throne of God. The king of Israel will be representing the throne of God. And therefore, modesty, humility, not being full of self-pride, not being full of brazenness. Everyone around the king, his pharmacist, his cook, the butlers, they're all serving the king of Israel. And he has to make sure that everyone serving him, his head should not fill up with pride. He has to have the nation on his shoulders. He has the responsibility if there's a king. Okay? So he has to check himself out all the time. He has to be balanced with blessings, wealth, and also spiritual national concerns of the nation. And therefore, he has to be the most central person in the Jewish people. He can't go astray to the right, to the left, as we see. To prove the point that we want to say, look at verse 18, share it with me. Vayachish shifto. Vayachish shifto, when he's sitting on the throne. Okay? Al kisei mamlachto. V'chatav lo et mishnei haTorah hazot al sefer. Milifnei hakohanim halviim. Mishnei haTorah zot. Thomas, the nickname of this chumash? No. Mishnei Torah. Why is it nicknamed Mishneh? There are a lot of things repeated here. Mishneh from the word? Shnaim. Okay? Is that what he has to write? The book of Deuteronomy? Mishneh Torah Zot? Two different copies. So Mishneh here means he must have two Sifrei Torah. And your question is? Why? Why? What does he have to have two Sifrei Torah? We're going to
double share of what everyone has to do? Because isn't everybody supposed to?
Maybe. We're going to talk about it in a moment. Okay? What will the Sefer Torah, when will it be with him? Let's continue going on to the next pasuk. Vaita imo. One Sefer will be with him, next to him. Imo. Im. With him. By his side. At his bosom. Vikaro vokol yemei chayav. He should be reading it every day. If he has time, when he has time. When he's not involved with national matters, he has free time. He's not just going to go to the bar to have a beer. He's not going to go to, just play tennis. He has to be in shape. He's going to do his 30 laps in the morning, whatever, right? Okay? He has to keep a healthy body. What is the first paragraph of Orot HaTshuva, the Lights of Penitence? Chapter 1, paragraph 1. Guf bari v'nefesh b'riya. Rav Kook writes, against what all of traditional Torah world would think, what? To deal with the body? The body is muktzah. The body is not important. It's the opposite. The Jewish body has been neglected for 2,000 years. The national body certainly has been neglected. We haven't had a nation for 2,000 years. And now we're coming back to the land of Israel. Very good that you went to the gym last night. If you want to have a healthy Jewish soul, you need a strong body. The body and the soul are united together. We don't believe that they're opposite entities. You need the body to contain the soul. Otherwise, when the body expires, the soul goes back up to heaven. That's what happens after a person dies. Ad 120 shana, right? So the body's important. Here, when he has free time and he's maintaining himself, he has to read the Sefer Torah, has to know that the values, the ideals of the Torah, of the Jewish people, have to be the most paramount thing on his mind. Leman yomad liyirat Hashem elokav. He has to have yirat shamayim. Don't think because he's the king, he's exempt from having fear of heaven. He has to remember there's someone above him that's allowing him to be king, that's giving him a blessing to be king, to gaining the support of the nation. Lishmor kol divrei Torah azov et hachukim el arsotam. So by the reading of the Torah, being connected to the ideals of the Jewish people, he, as the king of Israel, will not go to the right or to the left and leave the values. A person might think, I don't need you, Hashem. I'm a king. I have wealth. I have this. I have that. If it would not be for God, you wouldn't be the king. Pasuk of the ending pasuk of this matter, of this chapter. Leman yarich, levilti rum levavo me'achav. Exactly what we spoke about. So he doesn't get into a level of arrogance. Ulevilti sor min mitzvah yamin usmal leman yarich yamim mamlachto hu uvanav kol Yisrael. Let's just, for the next few moments, deal with this idea of the king writing to Sefer Torah. By the way, is there a commandment for the Jewish people to write a Sefer Torah? What, sir? Just the Levium?
No, all Jews. All Jews.
Ha'azinu. If you count the mitzvot, how many mitzvot are there? Okay, I'm just checking to see if you know. 613. Most mitzvot listers count number 613 in that song of Ha'azinu at the end of the book of Devarim. Quote, Kitvu lachem et hashira hazot. Write for yourself this song, Hashira hazot. According to the simple meaning of that pasuk in chapter 31, I forgot where it is exactly, they think it's write for yourself the song of Ha'azinu. There is a song that Moshe sings at the end of the Torah. Okay? So maybe people think that's the pshat. That could be the pshat, but there's a midrashic halacha that each and every Jew must write a Sefer Torah. And then it says in the second half of the pasuk, quote, V'lamda et b'nei Yisrael, and learn or teach b'nei Yisrael. In other words, the purpose of writing a Sefer Torah is to study. Koren Publishers, Shalom, how are you? What? I can buy published books with the Chumash and the Tanakh in them? I'm going to order 15 for this year, thank you. Did you hear what happened in our generation? There's publishing of books today. So maybe there's no longer in existence a mitzvah, commandment to write a Sefer Torah. Answer. The Rosh, Masechet Gittin, Gittin, Kedushin, I forgot. He says, not everyone can write a Sefer Torah. I'm going to go to my insurance broker. How much will it cost to get a scribe to write a Sefer Torah?
How much it costs to write it?
Yeah.
50,000.
Can you give me a discount, please? We'll talk afterwards. Thank you. It costs a lot of money. Not everyone can write a Sefer Torah. Even if I give the money to a scribe, a sofer, and he's writing it for me, it's my commandment. He's doing it for me. That's called shlichut. He's my shaliach, right? So it's for me a little too expensive. Can I go to the store and buy Sfarim to study? Okay. So some of the Rishonim say yes. If the purpose of writing a Sefer Torah is for the purpose of studying, then when we purchase for our library Sfarim to study with, we can perform the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah. So that's regarding that particular mitzvah. Let's go back to here. 2 Sifrei Torah. The Talmud says, and that'll answer David Bradley's question, the why that you asked as well. 2 Sifrei Torah, number 1, when the king goes out to war, he has a Sefer Torah with him. Anyone see the film clips of the liberation of Yerushalayim in the Six-Day War? Who was the chief rabbi? Rav Goren, in righteous blessed memory. He was with, what was the paratroopers unit that broke through Lion's Gate? Okay, it was the paratroopers unit that came from the east that broke through Lion's Gate, and he, with his driver, was behind the infantry, right? And right when Temple Mount was liberated, he came there to the Kotel, the area, and he raised the flag. A student of Rav Hanan Porat was there from Merkaz Rav Kook, and he had in his hand a small, in his bosom, he had a Sefer Torah. You can see it in the film clips. I don't know if you saw it. That's one Sefer Torah for the king. That when he goes to war, the king has the Sefer Torah with him. One, that the Talmud says. And second, inside his library. Okay? Inside his library. In other words, some ask, well, can he inherit a Sefer Torah from his father, grandfather? No. He has to make an effort to have two Sifrei Torah written. Okay? Some say, in the name of the Gaonim, in the Gaonic era, in the 8th and 9th centuries, in Persia and other areas where these great scholars were before the medieval commentators, in the name of Rav Nachshon Gaon, it's brought that in this Sefer Torah that he's taking with him all the time when he leaves to go to war, to go out, it's not all of the Sefer Torah. Some say that it's only the 10 Commandments, because in the 10 Commandments is the root of all 613 mitzvot. They're one of the great Gaonim. Have you heard of them, gentlemen? Rabbi Saadia Gaon, one of the great Gaonim. He writes how all of the 613 commandments come out of the 10 Commandments itself. Okay. Now regarding the king, I want to wrap up this matter. I read something by Rav Misha Rubin, he's a Rosh Yeshiva. 3 areas of responsibility does the king have. First, internationally even, representing Am Yisrael to the world. Second, inside, the Ministry of Interior to the Jewish people. And third, towards himself. Okay? When he's meeting up with the president of Austria, when the king of Israel is meeting up with the president of Belgium and Italy and other nations, okay, the Torah demands from the king of Israel the proper behavior, the proper speech that's written in the Sefer Torah. And therefore, the king, even internationally, the king of Israel, he has to represent the Jewish people according to the values and the ideals of our Torah. That's towards the world. Okay? Do you remember, we spoke about this yesterday, when the people during the time of Samuel the prophet were not happy with the leadership of Shmuel the prophet, they came to Shmuel and they asked for a king to fight our wars, to do this. The king is going to have the supreme authority. He will be, together with the nation, to make the decision maker to lead the nation to war. And he goes out to war himself. He doesn't stand in the back with binoculars and giving orders, like we learn about King David, also in the book of Shmuel. King David himself is out there in war. So he's very different in his relationship to the international world. The king, both when he meets with people or he goes out to the war, he's representing the nation. He's out in the front. Moshe Rabbeinu, as a king of Israel, went out himself and fought the wars of Sichon, the king of Amorites, and Og, the king of the Bashan, or thereafter Yoshua ben Nun. He also led the nation. He was in front of the army. He didn't sit at home like the kings of the world sit at home. And therefore, the kings of Israel are supreme actors in the international arena, in the diplomatic arena. They have connections, diplomatic connections with nations of the world, with ministers of the world. He may have to negotiate matters. The Torah is with him. The Torah is his guide. The Torah is ner l'raglav, the light to his feet, how to guide him. A question before we go towards the inside, yes?
You said I think there were 3 responsibilities that
Klapei chutz, klapei pnim, klapei atzmo. In responsibility number 2, inside, meaning to the nation of Israel, who is responsible for the development of the state? The king of Israel. Who will make sure there's no anarchy and there's order in the world? Economic order, social order inside the state of Israel? The king. Okay? Do you remember when Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, as we read about him in the book of Menachem, the book of Kings, when he was being inaugurated and God revealed himself, God asked him, what do you want? He didn't say, I want 5 hamburgers with ketchup and sauerkraut. What did he ask for? Quote, Leiv shomea, lishpot et amecha, lahavin bein tov lara. He wants to make sure that he can be providing justice in order to separate between good and evil. That the Jewish people be benefited from a judicial system, from law and order, from economic prosperity, okay? But the basis of good life in the Jewish people, there's law and order, there's justice, there are values, there's righteousness, and so on. Who's going to be in charge of that system? The king of Israel. And last, to himself, okay? Machon, he's the most supreme personality in the state of Israel. He has to make sure, Tohar Midot, that his attributes, his character are pure. He can say, well, I'm the king, I can do anything and everything. No. Upon him is the level of ethics, the highest level. He has to ask of himself even more. Remember, the greater the person is in the Jewish people, the greater his behavior has to be on a higher level. More is expected. He has greater capabilities. Someone who's lower has less capabilities. Okay? We see this in the army itself, right? In the hierarchy of the army, the higher the level, the katzin, the officer is in the army, more is expected from him. He's less time at home. He has less free time. He's more hours on the road serving the Jewish people. And there has to be humility. The king has to have humility. That's part of his hard work. He has to give both honor to others, and he can't exploit others because he's on a higher level. If there's a need, he can go to David Bradley's refrigerator and take the food out of his office. He can go to Avigdor Meyer's house and take the pharmacist and cook out of your house. If it's for the need of the king, he can do anything he wants. He can take your money if he needs it, if there's a need. But just to exploit, to capitalize on things where there's no need for it, ma pitom. The king has to demand from himself the highest level of morality. One more point before we go further. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, heard of him? Rabbi Shimon, one of the greatest authors, the greatest Tanakh scholars. He wrote the book called? Are you learning Zohar already? I hope not. You're not 40 years old. He wrote the Zohar, the secrets of the Torah. Just like there's a revealed oral Torah. It's called the Shas, the Mishnah, and the Gemara. The secrets of the Torah are written in the book by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai called the Zohar. What is the word Zohar? This radiance of light. Okay? In any event, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, the Jewish people, they themselves are like royalty. Everyone in the Jewish people has an aspect of royalty. There's some halachic implications regarding Shabbat and fragrances is mentioned in the tractate of Shabbat, and I can get into it. But why does he say so? Why does he say that the Jewish people as a nation are b'nei melachim, the children of royalty? Why? Why does he say that? Because we're the most chosen from God. That's exactly right. We're the most unique, most special, most divine. And if God is the king of the world, so we are b'nei melachim. That means we have a lot to live up to. We have a high standard of morals, ethics, ideals. Yet at the same time, the Jewish person is so, not energized, he's so containing just these high abilities if we use it the wrong way, there's no better sinners, there's no better criminals than Jewish people. Why? Because we're using these great abilities for negativity. We can use those great abilities. Today there's so many righteous Jews here in the state of Israel, day and night, working. We have no idea how many people are so righteous. And people in the hours, tremendous abilities. We see the economic, technological progress here in the state of Israel. We're just a young people, we're a young state, yet there's so much progress in such a small period of time. So many great talents. Why? When the Jewish people come home to the land of Israel, bingo. You play. We'll play later. I want to see if you're really good in it. Okay? It happens. It flourishes. So Bnei Yisrael, all of Bnei Yisrael, from a certain aspect, we too are like the children of kings. Hebrew, Bnei Melachim. I want to go to the next matter, and I want to skip, with your permission, Pasuk, in the next chapter, chapter 18, verses 9 and on. Ki ata ba'al ha'aretz. When we're coming to the land, you see we're reading from next chapter, chapter 18, Yudchet, Pasuk Tet. I want to go to this next section. Okay? Ki ata ba'al ha'aretz. Remember, the entire book of Deuteronomy is a collection of speeches of Moshe Rabbeinu prior to his death. 36 days, gentlemen, is the entire book of Deuteronomy, Chumash Devarim. As we read a few months ago, the first parsha opened up with the first day of the 11th month. The first month of our calendar is Nisan. What? There you go. And the last month of the calendar is? The last month, not of the year. The last month of the counting of months is Adar. Thank you, Amos and Thomas. So month number 1 is Nisan. Why? Because that's when we received our freedom, our national freedom. God took us out of Mitzrayim. So the counting of months is one system, and the counting of years is a different system. We were told that the book of Devarim is the first day of the 11th month, the first day of the month of Shvat. And we know, according to the oral tradition, that Moshe Rabbeinu passes away on which calendar date? Adar. The 7th of Adar. That's right, the 7th. It's about 36 days. 36 days is all of the Chumash, Devarim, except, and then it says that they mourn for Moshe Rabbeinu 30 days, but more or less, it's 36 days. This is a collection of the speeches, the last speeches of Moshe Rabbeinu. Is he going to go into the land of Israel? No. His major concern is getting the nation ready to go in. After 40 years, after the coming out of Egypt, he wants this generation. The other generation died out. They spoke bad about the land of Israel. These are the children who are now adults, and their children, more than 600,000 men, with women and older and younger people, are going to in 2 or 3 weeks from now, go into the land of Israel. Who are we going to meet up with? A foreign culture. A very different culture. Idolatry. Terrible values. Terrible manners. Different ways of thinking and life. We're going to meet up with the 7 Canaanite nations that had a right to live here. God allowed them to live here over the generations, but now their pack of sins has been completed. They have no longer any moral right to live here in the land of Canaan, the land of Israel, and therefore there are going to be 3 alternatives. We're not going to learn about that here, but actually it can be learned a little later. I'll mention it maybe tomorrow's show. I don't want to go too far. Okay, Pasuk 9. Ki ata ba el haaretz. Who's ata? The nation. Ki ata ba, verse 9. Do you see where we're up to, Avigdor? Pasuk 10, verse 9. Ki ata ba el haaretz. Asher Adonai Elohecha notein lach. Again, the word notein in the present tense the land that he's giving is always giving it to us in the present tense. Lo tilmad la'asot keto'avot hagoyim ahem. A general concern. You know how Jewish people are always curious to see what's going on. Do you know why a lot of traffic jams are collected here on the roads? Let's just say, God forbid, a car got stuck. Everyone that passes the car stops and sees what's going on here. And everyone passes the car and everyone stops and sees what's going on. And that causes a bottleneck of traffic. We're always curious to find out what's going on. And often, what does the statement say? The Jews always think the grass is greener by the neighbor. Have you heard of that expression? Is it a Dutch? You could say that in Dutch as well. How do you say it in Dutch? Okay. Jews always think, there's something better happening in the next door neighbor. We're going to go in. We're going to meet up with Canaanites. Let's say the wars are not ended. And we're going to learn that during the course of the book of Joshua, various Canaanite enclaves remained. They were not all wiped out, or they did not all leave. This could lead to, how are you, Mr. Muhammad? And I'm talking to my non-Jewish neighbor here and there, and one day it's this, I'm saying hello, the next day hello, he invites me for a beer, and then there's a sweet 16 party, and all of a sudden, your daughter is marrying his son. Could it happen?
Maybe.
Oh, you never heard of the word intermarriage before? You never heard of it? So you should know. In Europe, what's the percentage of intermarriage? Russell? Do you know?
Probably very high.
Okay, you're very diplomatic and not giving me a number.
I don't know a figure.
In America, it's over 50%, isn't it? To our regret, isn't it? Is it? Do you know? Probably, right?
70 to 80% within the Reform world.
70 to 80%. And in Europe, it could probably be higher, I would assume, God forbid. Here comes the Torah. Lo tilmad lasot ketoavot hagoyim ahem. Now here we're talking about deep things. Here we're talking about there are ways of connecting to a God. There are ways of making decisions, what to do and what not to do. For instance, Pasuk Yud, verse 10. Lo yimatzei v'cha ma'avir beno uvito ba'esh kosem ksamim me'onein u'menachesh u'mechashef. Okay? They use enchanters, sorcerers, they use superstitions, as we keep on reading, v'chover chaver, v'shoel ovi yedoni, v'doresh. They consult ghosts, spirits, all these weird type of things that they believe in. They believe that they have powers in the world, and that's how they manage the world. Okay? Some of you have ever visited India before. I have a son that finished the army, and he's still vacationing. He was in India, and you see idolatry all over the place. Everywhere you're going there. That's what they believe in. You go to the Philippines, idolatry all over the place. It didn't start now. You're going to meet up with Canaanites, that their thought process, their practices through sorcery and enchantments, they think there's a connection to God through these things. And you might say, well, maybe I'll try it. What is vidorei shel hametim, even beseeching the dead? So here, Moshe Rabbeinu mentions these things, which are totally contradictory to the monotheistic belief of the Jewish people of one God, and not entreating God by using a broker, by using a go-between. God considers these things what? Verse 12. Ki to'avat Adonai kol osei ele, uviglal to'ivot ele, Adonai Elohecha morish otam mipanecha. Because of these ways of life, okay, these abominations in the eyes of God, that's why they're going to be driven out. Remember, we said it before, the land of Israel is just not any other geographic piece of land. It's not just soil like there is anywhere. The land itself, as Rav Kook writes, today is the yortzeit of Rav Kook, the 3rd of Elul, the land is hugged with inner riches. This land is hugged with inner wealth, with spiritual capabilities and talents. This land is a land of a belief in one God. Here there's no democracy as far as, well, we'll be able to accept other beliefs. The land doesn't accept it. Who says? He says. And therefore, when the Jewish people are returning to the land of Israel, and we're going to meet up with another entity called the Canaanite nations, and their ways of life are just the opposite of our ways of life, that's why I'm going to drive them out. We'll just mention again, the Canaanites have a right to change their beliefs. The Canaanites have a right, the doors are open. If they want, they can go live in Austria. The Canaanites have a right not to continue their spiritual ways and live here as non-Jewish settlers. And that will be one of the alternatives that Yoshua will offer the Canaanites, as we learn from the Talmud Yerushalmi. But right now, God, Moshe Rabbeinu in his speech, is calling that we have to eradicate these magical practices. Keep away from sorcery, okay? Because that's the opposite. And now the ending of this pasuk, the ending of this section, I'd like to share with you verse 13. How many words in pasuk Yud Gimel, gentlemen? 5 words. Tamim tihiyeh im Adonai Elohecha. Tamim tiyeh. Wholeheartedness. Tamim tiyeh, you shall be wholehearted im Hashem Elokecha. How do we understand this? Is this a mitzvah? Or is this a prelude? Is this a means in order to get to another end? How do we understand this? How did Rambam, Maimonides, understand this matter? But before we go to the Rambam, what is the connection between this pasuk and what we just read? The Torah just said, you cannot have sorcery, magic, don't use these magic balls, don't talk to ghosts. Do you talk to ghosts?
All the time.
All the time?
You don't?
I don't talk to ghosts. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I don't believe in these ghosts. I don't think they have powers from God. You might meet up with a ghost, but maybe God wants you to meet up with him and think that he's for real and he's testing you. Okay? He's testing, will you really believe in him or you believe in something else? Here, everyone look together with me to try to understand Tamim Tihiyeh Im Hashem Elokecha. We're going to see Rashi for one moment. But let's first... Tamim Tihiyeh. Pick a color.
Blue.
I didn't ask you. Pick a color. Say purple. Say purple. There you go. Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. Rashi says, what does it mean to be wholehearted with God? What does it mean to serve God wholeheartedly? Rashi says the following: Hitalech imo bitmimut. Be wholehearted with God. Something happened to you, to your life, to your personal life. Why did you do this to me? Don't you know that I deserve something else? There could be people reacting that way. Meaning, would you do that? Do what I just did right now. You can come and be convicted and make a claim against God. Say, you know what you're doing. You're in a hard time. Something hard happened to you. Something difficult. So you could say, Hashem, you don't know what you're doing. And you're complaining. It shouldn't happen to me. It shouldn't be this way. That's not being wholehearted. Someone who's wholehearted, he knows. He has more than 3 degrees in world management, doesn't he? God has several more degrees in world management, in national management, in personal management. He knows what he's doing. And he knows for the best. Someone said, Thomas, maybe you can verify this, that the human mind is not perfect or complete. It's true. Are there things that we perhaps don't even understand? It happens to you as well. Welcome to the club. So, gentlemen, it could very well be that we don't understand that what things that are God doing. Who says that we have to understand everything? Who says that we can understand everything? He has accounts, considerations that are above and beyond, Menachem Listman Incorporated. I don't understand everything. Go back to this Rashi. Hitalech imo b'tmimut. When you're reflecting matters of godliness, be wholehearted. Titzapelo, anticipate him. Meaning, pray to him. Meaning, get closer to him. Meaning, give your security and trust in him. Go with him. Lo tachkor achar atidot. Don't go to the sorcerer, to the magician, to the ghost. What's going to happen to me next week? What's going to happen tomorrow? Would you please share with us, Amos, what's behind your smile?
Yeah, that's so typical. We would like to know, but we never will.
Okay, we would like to know, we can't know. Ela, rather, kolma shiavo alecha, whatever happens to you in your life, Rashi says, kabel bitmimut, accept it wholeheartedly. V'az tiyeh imo ulechelko. For those learning Rashi, and you know that Rashi is like a science. Rashi, until now, usually we meet up with Rashi, he's very what? Concise. He's very short in words. He speaks, Rashi's underneath the line in your book below. Here, we're going to ask, why is Rashi lengthy? To explain this pasuk. But apparently, we're talking about something which is so special. Do you know Rambam, Maimonides? Has anyone read his introduction? How he surveys all the Torah and writes what are the rules for numbering mitzvot. He has several rules. Rambam, Maimonides, is one of those that wrote down all the 613 mitzvot as he understood it. One of his rules is something which is a general principle that embraces all of the Torah, that's applicable to all of the Torah. Maimonides does not enumerate, he does not count that as a mitzvah, because it's not a specific action, it's not a specific matter. Rather, it's something which is embracing all of our life. Some explain Rambam did not remember. What is the first book of Maimonides? It's called the Book of Mitzvot. Then we have the Book of Knowledge and the Book of Love, right? That's how the order of the book. Please correct me if I'm making a mistake. So in the Book of Mitzvot, which famous, what we think is a mitzvah, he does not count?
Conquering land.
Moving to Israel.
Settling the land of Israel, thank you. Settling the land of Israel. He doesn't count it. Some great later scholars say, you know why the Rambam didn't write it? Because it's a commandment that embraces all of our life, all of our body, our entire inner system. That to live in the land of Israel is something fundamental, including everything. Yet the same Rambam, in various specific laws, for instance, the famous law in Masechet Gittin, Daf, page 6, can I ask a Gentile to put on the lights for me on Shabbat or on Yom Tov?
No.
Is it a Torah prohibition? Russell, can I ask a Gentile to do a melacha for me on Shabbat? Is it a Torah prohibition? It's a rabbinical prohibition. I might come to do it myself. So we don't ask a non-Jew to do it. There's a patent, right? A loophole. How can I have it done? Oh, it's very hot in here. And you might understand, you're laughing, and you might understand that he can help me by putting on the air conditioner. That's how, so these are rabbinical laws. Do you know? What does the Talmud say in Gittin, page 6, if I'm not mistaken?
It says that if on Shabbat it comes across you to have a contract to buy a house in Israel, then you can.
Meaning you're afraid that if you don't buy the property now, go ahead.
Then you won't won't get the house.
Why not?
Because maybe your contract, the opportunity will be lost if it's not signed on Shabbat. So you can ask a Gentile to sign it for you.
To violate a rabbinical prohibit. Would you please stone this man over here? But he's absolutely right. Let's explain what you said beautifully, Russell. Kol hakavod. There's only one exception to the rule when it's talking about that rabbinical prohibition to ask a non-Jew to do melacha for you, is you can ask him to please draw up a contract for me to buy land, not in Vienna, to buy land in the land of Israel. Why? To settle the land of Israel. That's the only exception to the rule. I know you're freezing, you want the heater on. It's not going to work. I know it's a very hot day and you want the air conditioner. You can't tell him, would you please put the air conditioner on? But to buy land. Mustafa, Tal, Alhamdulillah, Kifalak. Go over to him and draw up a contract and buy land for me today on Shabbat. Write up a contract. So that's allowed. Why am I mentioning it? The Rambam brings that halacha in the laws of Shabbos, that you're allowed to ask a non-Jew to do writing up a contract to buy the land of Israel. So obviously the Rambam holds that what?
Mitzvah.
There's a mitzvah of what? Of settling the land.
Right.
What call did you get, honey? Really? Did you hear? Yossi wants to divorce his wife, Rachel. What's the reason? She doesn't want to make aliyah with him. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. And what did the Beit Din say? He's exempt? Wow. Did you hear what happened? Yossi's divorcing his wife, Rachel. They're in New York. And he's exempt from paying the financial amount of the wedding contract of the ketubah. Because the Talmud says that everyone should make aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. And even a couple should make. And if she doesn't, he's allowed to give her a...
Get.
What do you mean by get? What's a get?
Divorce document.
Getaway document. What did he call it? What did he call it? Get away from it. Have you heard of the word get? Get is the Mishnaic word for a divorce. Okay? He's allowed to give her a get and be exempt from paying the financial obligation in the ketubah because of the mitzvah. Did the Rambam write that halacha from the Gemara? Of course he did. So let's get back to here. I don't want to go too astray. The Rambam does not write that this mitzvah tamim tihiyeh im Hashem Elokecha is one of the 613 mitzvot. Why? Maybe he holds that this attribute of being wholehearted in your life with God is so fundamental, is so basic, so important that it's not a particular action. It's the way you conduct yourself all your life when things happen to you for the good and not for the good. However, Ramban Nachmanides in Spain, he takes issue with the Rambam, and he explains the following, that this is a mitzvah, this is a commandment to be wholehearted in our dealings with God. And he brings the pasuk, Tamim tihiyeh Hashem Elokecha, and he writes the following, I want to quote, with your permission, gentlemen. Nachmanides Ramban, which you don't have in front of you, he says we have to direct our hearts exclusively to God, believing that He alone, okay, is the doer of all. He knows the truth regarding today, yesterday, and even tomorrow. Okay? He knew that you're going to come to learn in Machon Meir, Victor, years ago, even though you didn't know it and your father didn't even think about the idea. Okay? Same thing for you, Yonatan. Okay? We, like the Torah says, don't consult these soothsayers, or we don't believe that their words are really authentic. Okay? We have to realize that everything is in God's hand with our efforts. It's God's power who changes the order according to His will in the world. Okay? And therefore don't learn from the nations. Isaiah says in chapter 10, don't learn from the way of the nations and don't be dismayed at the signs of heaven. There are things that happen to us that we're not in control of, nor do we understand them. Okay? Avram Avinu, do you remember when he's coming into the land of Israel and meeting with the Canaanites? And Avram Avinu gets the mitzvah to do circumcision, which is a mitzvah of the covenant, the milah, circumcision of the Brit Milah. God tells Avram Avinu there in chapter 17 in Bereshit, in Genesis, Hitalech lefanai veheye tamim. The same word here. What's the word? Tamim. Walk before me and you be wholehearted. Avram Avinu had to oppose the idolatry, the ways of the Canaanites here. Avram Avinu was the Lone Ranger. There was no one with him. No families, no nation, no nothing. He's here just with he and his wife and the hundreds of people that came with him. And he's meeting up with Canaanite culture all over. And these are people that attribute power to the sun, attribute power to the moon and to the stars. Avram Avinu thought about the same thing when he was in downtown Iraq. He also thought that's what people believed in until he contemplated and he thought and thought, this world is greater. There must be a power, a source of life, of energy, of goodness that's bringing the sun up every morning and the moon coming out every night. And therefore, the same Ramban, who's differing on the Rambam, he says, yes, there is a mitzvah to be wholehearted, to accept everything and anything that God does to us, because he knows best. So the Ramban points out this correspondence between this commandment to Avram Avinu and our mitzvah here. What God commanded Avram Avinu, this is what God, through the speech of Moshe Rabbeinu, is commanding the nation of Israel. Okay? And now, I want to help learn the science in Rashi. Everyone put your finger in the Rashi. We're going to read it again. Tamim tiyam Hashem Elokecha, verse 13 in Rashi. Hitalech imo betmimut. Repeat after me. We're going to do it again out loud. Echat, shtayim, shalosh. Hitalech imo betmimut. Now it's my turn. Utitzapelo, together. Utitzapelo. My turn. Velo tachkor achar atidot. Together. Do you have a comma now? I don't know if they put a comma, punctuation. Ella. Ella is rather. Kol ma sheyavo alecha. Repeat. Kabel bitmimut. This last phrase that we just read, everything that happens to you, accept it wholeheartedly. Don't question God. You don't know what you're doing, as if you know better than God. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows you. He knows your neighbor. He knows your ancestors. He knows the land of Israel. He knows what's going to happen tomorrow and in the next century as well. He knows exactly what he's doing. Tmimut. Wow, what a wonderful matter. I'm asking right now, why doesn't Rashi stop here? What are the last four words, David Adler, of Rashi that we have yet to read? 10. Why doesn't Rashi stop here without the last four words? You have an idea, Thomas? Ve'az tiyeh imo ulechalko. There was something Rashi is questioning. Do you remember, some of you? One of the signs, the points of Rashi is he doesn't ask the question often, but he gives the answer. We have to, if we can, what's the word? To deduce. What is Rashi's question here? That he writes ve'az, and then tiyeh imo ulechalko. You have an understanding, Matanya? Huh? איזה צבע זה? אדום. I just put in 3 cantillation signs. Am I right, by the way? Yeah. Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. Zakef katon, that's the name of the cantillation sign. There are two types of cantillation signs. One is that serves into the next word, tam misharet, and the other is called a tam mafsik, a cantillation sign that interrupts, stops, pauses. I purposely wrote this phrase of the pasuk in 2 lines. Tamim tiyeh, and then it says im, and this is a stop sign. Hashem Elokecha.
It's like one is there shall be, and the other is you will be. I mean, yeah.
I want to understand the difference, Thomas, between Tamim Tiyeh and the next phrase, Im Hashem Elokecha. Rashi used the word ve'az. What does ve'az mean? And then. Then is the consequence. Then is the result. Rashi's asking, why don't you just write Tamim Tiyeh? Be Tamim. Why do you have to say Im Hashem Elokecha? It's obvious you're going to be wholehearted with God. Rashi says there's a consequence, there's a result of being Tamim. If you're going to be wholehearted, you're going to accept everything that God does, you're going to work hard, you're going to make all your efforts, you're going to try to do good, but sometimes things don't work the way you want them to work. Okay? I unfortunately experienced a family sorrow. My dear sister passed away less than a month ago. She was only 65 years old. She was ill. It was very sad. I'm still in 30 days of mourning. What am I going to tell God? You don't know what you're doing? He knows what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. I have to accept it. You're allowed to be sad. You're allowed to express your emotions. It's very important. That's why God gives us sadness when there's mourning. But we have to get out of it. We have to accept it. If we're going to be tamim, the result will be im. Then you're going to be with God. Ve'az, and then meaning the result, Thomas, ve'az means the result will be tiyeh imo, you'll be with him, and the last word in Rashi, ulechelko, and then you'll be like part of God. What does it mean to be part of God? This is a philosophical concept. God of the world and the nation of Israel are one entity. They're so interconnected. They're inseparable. We have the ability in our lives to absorb the character traits, the mentality, the philosophy of godliness that makes us like part of God. Don't misunderstand me. We're physical beings. After 120 years, God willing, we expire. But everything we do relates to, everything good, the good we do relates to the soul. That becomes eternal value. That is stored in an eternal memory bank that has no lacking whatsoever in the world. It's godly. That could count for your grandchildren. You don't know what you're going to be doing. When you're doing these good deeds, when you're taking upon yourself these great attributes, and you're expressing your faith, and your ideals and the values that you're doing, you don't know what you're building on your scoreboard. This could be amazing things that we're building for ourselves, our families, our grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And that's building our world. So Rashi says, ve'az, and then, tiyeh imo. Then you're going to be with him, and you'll be like part of him. Okay? You'll be like part of him. Questions or comments? Anyone? You can tell me it's boring or whatever you like to say. So then we're going to stop here. Rabbi Reuven, Dr. Fireman will be here for his next shiur. His schedule this semester is different, right? He's going to be teaching on
Tuesday.
Yemei Shlishi.